"The cheapest thing here is the door, old man," Grant Miller said, loud enough for the corner tables to hear. Adrian Cole stood inside the Velvet Room on Mercer Street in Chicago, wearing a faded gray coat, scuffed brown shoes, and a cap pulled low over hair he had not combed carefully on purpose. His beard was rough. His hands held $3.40 in coins. The bar around him glowed like a jewel box: amber lights, black marble, brass rails, crystal glasses, soft jazz from the stage near the back wall. Men in tailored suits looked at him like a stain. Women with silver handbags turned away. Chloe Reed, the bartender, leaned toward another server and whispered, "He must have missed the shelter line." A few people laughed. Adrian did not answer. He sat at a small table near the kitchen door, placed the coins beside the menu, and asked the young waitress who came to him what the cheapest thing was. Lily Dawson looked at the coins. Then she looked at his face, not his coat, not his shoes, his face. She closed the menu gently and said, "The cheapest drink is a small soda, but if you are hungry, I can bring soup and bread. I will cover it for my staff meal." The laughter faded. Grant stepped forward, angry that one poor-looking man had become visible in a room built for expensive people. Lily added, "You do not have to be rich to be treated like a person here." Adrian could not speak. Within 1 hour, Grant would be standing before company leadership, trying to explain hidden tip records, deleted complaints, security footage, and why he had trained an entire bar to worship wallets instead of human beings. Chloe would stop laughing. The most powerful customers in the room would lower their eyes, and Lily Dawson, a waitress who could barely pay rent, would discover that the hungry stranger she fed was the millionaire who owned every Velvet Room location in the country. But in that moment, Adrian only stared at the soup menu, because Lily had just said the sentence, his mother had died believing the world still needed to learn. Friday night at the Velvet Room began with polish. At 6:08 in the evening, the first reservation walked through the glass doors under the gold sign. The door host straightened his jacket. The piano player touched the first soft notes of Blue Moon. The back bar lights came on one row at a time, turning every bottle into a little tower of fire. The downtown Chicago location was the crown jewel of the chain. 3 floors above it were law offices and consulting firms. Across the street stood the old Emerson Hotel, where visiting executives spent more on 1 bottle of wine than some workers earned in a week. The bar had a private tasting room, a members' lounge, a chef who designed small plates with names longer than the meals, and a reservation system that ranked customers by spend level. On paper, the branch was perfect. That was why Adrian had come. Perfect numbers can hide ugly rooms. He stepped out of a taxi 2 blocks away at 7:22. He did not use the black company car. He did not wear the Italian suit hanging in his closet. He did not wear the watch the business magazines loved to photograph. In his coat pocket was an old photograph of his mother, Rose Cole, standing behind a diner counter with a towel over one shoulder and tired kindness in her eyes. In his other pocket were $3.40. He had counted the coins himself before leaving. A quarter from the kitchen drawer, 2 dimes from his desk, 3 $1 bills from a parking tip envelope. He wanted the amount to feel real in his hand. Small money carries a different weight when people believe it is all you have. Adrian paused across the street and looked up at the sign, The Velvet Room. He had named the first location after the red velvet booth where his mother used to rest her feet after closing time at a diner on the south side. She worked there until her knees swelled and her fingers cracked from washing cups in hot water. When Adrian was a boy, she used to bring home half sandwiches wrapped in napkins. She always made them look like gifts, never scraps. That mattered. A person can be poor and still be given dignity at the table. That was the rule she taught him before he knew the word dignity. Now his company owned 16 upscale bars in 5 cities. The downtown branch was the strongest performer. Highest wine sales, highest private client bookings, highest average ticket, highest reported guest satisfaction among top spenders. And still, in the past 6 months, 9 employees had quit. 8 customer complaints had used the same phrase in different ways. I felt like I did not belong. Adrian put one hand on the old photograph in his pocket. Then he crossed the street. The doorman saw him coming and stopped smiling before Adrian reached the entrance. "Good evening," Adrian said. The doorman looked at his coat. "Do you have a reservation?" "No, we are mostly full tonight." Adrian glanced through the glass. Several tables were open. "I only need a small seat." The doorman hesitated, then opened the door just enough to make it clear the welcome was not sincere. At the Velvet Room, even rejection knew how to wear perfume. Inside, warmth hit Adrian's face. The smell was cedar smoke, orange peel, roasted garlic, and expensive cologne. Glasses chimed. A woman laughed near the bar. A private server carried a silver tray with 4 tall cocktails that glowed red beneath dried citrus wheels. Chloe Reed stood behind the bar with sleeves rolled neatly to her elbows. She was talented, fast, and beautiful in the way upscale bars liked. She could name rare whiskeys without looking. She could pour a martini so clean it looked engineered. She could smile at a venture capitalist like his story was new. But when she saw Adrian, her eyes dropped to his shoes. Then she turned away. Adrian walked to the bar. "Excuse me," he said. Chloe kept polishing a glass. "We do not have free samples." He looked at her. "I did not ask for one." She gave a thin smile. "Then what can I get started for you?" He opened his palm. $3.40 rested there. "I am trying to see what I can afford." A man in a navy suit at the bar heard him and snorted into his drink. Chloe's eyes sharpened. "Sir, most of our menu starts above that." "What is the cheapest item?" "Water is free," Chloe said. Then she leaned slightly toward the other bartender and added, "For now." The other bartender laughed under his breath. Adrian nodded. "May I sit down?" Chloe glanced toward Grant Miller. Grant stood near the host stand with a tablet in one hand and a sales report open on the screen. He was 41, clean-shaven, perfectly dressed, and proud of being feared by his staff. He believed fear made service sharp. He believed mercy made rooms sloppy. He believed a high-end bar should protect wealthy people from feeling near poverty. When Grant saw Adrian, irritation crossed his face like a shadow. He made a small circular motion with 2 fingers. "Move him away from the center." Chloe pointed toward the back corner, near the kitchen doors. "You can sit there if you are ordering." Adrian took the corner table. It was the worst seat in the room. Too close to the kitchen swing door. Too far from the stage. Hidden from the main floor, but visible enough that staff could watch him. The table surface had a tiny scratch in the varnish. The candle had burned unevenly. A folded menu sat beneath a water glass that no one had filled. Adrian sat. He watched. That was his real work tonight. At 7:31, a couple in designer coats entered without a reservation. Grant greeted them by name and found them a booth that had not existed for Adrian. At 7:36, a delivery driver entered to ask where to drop a package for the kitchen. Chloe waved him toward the alley before he finished speaking. At 7:42, an older woman in a wool coat asked for a single glass of house wine. She waited 9 minutes while servers passed her for higher-spending tables. Then Lily Dawson noticed. She crossed from the side station, touched the older woman's shoulder gently, and said, "I am sorry you waited. Let me take care of you." Adrian leaned back. There, not a policy, a person. Lily moved through the room with a kind of alert kindness that did not perform. She was 28, with tired eyes, neat dark hair tied at the back, and a white apron already marked with the evidence of work. She remembered water refills. She noticed a dropped napkin. She thanked the dishwasher who handed her a plate. She smiled at the older woman the same way Grant smiled at private clients, but without calculation.
Grant noticed too, not with approval, with impatience. "Lily," he called from the host stand. She finished pouring water before she answered. "Yes, Grant, table 12 needs attention. I am helping table 9. Table 12 is a bottle service table." Lily looked toward table 9, where the older woman sat alone. "She has been waiting." Grant's voice lowered. "And table 12 is spending." Adrian heard it, so did Chloe. So did Mrs. Helen Parker, the older woman seated near the stage, with a small glass of red wine and a cream shawl around her shoulders. Helen had been coming to the Velvet Room since the first month it opened. She knew the room before it became fashionable. She had known Rose Cole years earlier from the diner where Rose worked nights. Helen watched Adrian from across the room. Her eyes narrowed slightly, not because she recognized him fully, because something about the way he held himself did not match the coat. Some people can wear old clothes and still carry memory like a tailored suit. Adrian lowered his gaze before she could study him too long. At 7:50, Lily came to his table. "Good evening, sir," she said. "I am Lily. Thank you for waiting. Would you like water first?" Adrian looked up at her. "Yes, please. Still or sparkling? Tap water is fine." She nodded as if he had ordered the best bottle in the building. Of course. She poured it carefully. No sigh, no smirk, no look toward Grant for permission to be decent. Then she placed the menu before him. "Would you like a few minutes?" Adrian touched the coins. "I should tell you first, I only have $3.40. The table beside him went quiet. 3 young men in expensive jackets had been talking about a real estate deal. One of them turned. Adrian continued, "I do not want to waste your time. What is the cheapest thing I can order?" The real estate man laughed. $3, he said. "Brother, the ice costs more than that here." His friend said, "Maybe he wants to buy a napkin." Chloe looked over from the bar. "Sir, there is a coffee shop around the corner."
The third man raised his glass. "Or a church basement." Laughter moved in little pieces. Grant began walking toward the table. Lily stayed where she was. She did not laugh. She did not look embarrassed by Adrian. She closed the menu softly. "The cheapest drink is a small soda," she said. "But the kitchen made soup for staff meal tonight, tomato basil with bread. If you are hungry, I can bring you a bowl. I will cover it from my meal." The laughter weakened. Adrian looked at her. "You do not have to do that." "I know. I cannot tip you." "That is all right." "You may get in trouble." Lily gave a small smile. "I am usually halfway there anyway." Adrian almost smiled back, but his throat tightened first. "Why would you do that for a stranger?" Lily glanced toward Grant, who was close enough to hear now. Then she looked back at Adrian. "Because you walked in here, sat down quietly, and asked what you could afford instead of pretending. That should not make you invisible." Grant arrived. "Lily?" She turned. "Yes?"
A word in the office. She held her ground. "I am taking an order." Grant looked at Adrian coins on the table. "No, you are creating a problem." Adrian said nothing. Grant turned to him with a smile meant for witnesses. "Sir, I apologize for any confusion, but the Velvet Room has a standard to maintain. We cannot have guests occupying tables if they are not participating in service." Lily said, "He is participating. He asked for something affordable." Grant's eyes stayed on Adrian. "Our smallest soda is $6. Lily said, "I will cover the rest." "No," Grant said. That one word cut. Lily's hands tightened around her order pad. Grant lowered his voice, but not enough. "This is a premium floor, Lily. We are not running a soup kitchen." Adrian felt the room tilt around that sentence. A soup kitchen. He saw his mother hand placing a wrapped sandwich on their kitchen table when he was 9. He heard her say, "Food given with respect is not charity. It is proof somebody still sees you." Lily's voice stayed steady. "He has not done anything wrong." Grant smiled harder. "He is making customers uncomfortable." The real estate man at the next table lifted his glass. "I am deeply uncomfortable with poverty near my bourbon." His friends laughed. Chloe turned away, smiling into the glass she was polishing. Mrs. Helen Parker did not laugh. She set down her wine. Lily looked at the man in the suit, then back at Grant. If kindness makes them uncomfortable, that is not his fault. The table went silent. Grant's face changed. A manager like Grant could tolerate compassion if it stayed quiet. He could not tolerate it in front of customers, especially not when it made expensive men look small. He stepped closer. "Lily, you are here to sell, not save the world." She answered softly. "Maybe service is supposed to save one evening at a time." Adrian lowered his eyes. That sentence struck something too deep. He had come to test the bar. He had not expected to be tested himself. Grant looked at Adrian.
"Sir, I am going to ask you to finish your water and leave." Lily placed one hand on the table. "No." Everything stopped. It was not loud. It did not need to be. Grant stared at her. "Excuse me," Lily swallowed. Adrian saw fear cross her face. Real fear. The kind that comes from rent due on Monday, a child at home, and a manager who controls the schedule. But she did not move her hand. She said, "He is my table. Let me serve him." Chloe whispered from the bar, "There goes her weekend shifts." Adrian heard it. Lily heard it too. Grant smiled slowly. "Fine." He leaned toward Lily. "You buy him soup, it comes out of your staff meal. You keep him here, you lose your preferred section next week. And if a private client complains, I write it as service misjudgment." Lily's face went pale. Preferred section meant tips. Tips meant medicine for Noah, rent, school lunches, the unpaid electric bill folded in her purse. For 1 second, she almost stepped back. Adrian saw it happen. Not because she lacked courage.
Because courage always has a price, and poor people pay it in cash. Then Lily looked at the coins on the table, $3.40. She thought of Noah that morning, sitting at the small kitchen table with a fever patch on his forehead, asking, "If somebody is hungry but does not have money, what do we do?" She had told him, "We do not make them ashamed." Now the answer was standing in front of her, wearing an old coat. Lily stood straighter. "Then write it," she said. Grant blinked. "What?" "Write it as service misjudgment. But I will not make a hungry man leave because he only has $3. The room went still. Adrian looked at her for a long moment. He had signed contracts worth millions without his hand shaking. He had fired executives who lied to him. He had sat across from investors who once told him his first bar concept was too sentimental to scale. None of them had left him speechless. But this waitress did. Grant said, "Bring him the soup then. And after that, he leaves." Lily nodded once. "Thank you." She did not say it like surrender. She said it like a person choosing the line she could hold. As she walked toward the kitchen, Chloe leaned toward another bartender. "There goes Mother Teresa of table 14. The bartender snickered. Adrian kept his eyes on the water glass. His reflection in it looked tired, older, poorer than the man whose name was on the company documents. Good, that was the point. But he had already learned something he did not come prepared to learn. The worst person in the room was not always the one who insulted the poor man. Sometimes it was the leader who punished the kind employee for refusing to join him. At 8:06, Lily returned with a white bowl of tomato basil soup, 3 pieces of warm bread, a glass of water, and a clean cloth napkin. She placed each item down carefully. Not quickly, not with embarrassment, with the same grace she had given the bottle service table. "There you go," she said. "Please eat while it is warm." Adrian looked at the soup. Steam rose from the bowl. For a second, he was 10 years old again, sitting at a tiny kitchen table while Rose Cole put a chipped bowl in front of him and pretended she had already eaten at work. He looked up at Lily. "You are not afraid of losing your job." Lily smiled, but her eyes were sad. "I am terrified." "Then why do it?" "Because my son asked me once if people with no money still get to sit down. I told him yes." She glanced toward Grant. "I do not want to become the kind of person who teaches him otherwise." Adrian could not answer. Lily misunderstood his silence. She leaned closer and spoke gently. "You do not owe me anything. Eat first, worry later." The sentence almost broke him. Eat first, worry later. His mother used to say that. Same rhythm, same mercy. Adrian picked up the spoon. Before he could take the first bite, his phone buzzed inside his coat pocket. He did not take it out on the table. He lowered his hand under the edge and read the message from Marissa Blake, Chief Operations Director. "I am 8 minutes away with Human Resources, Legal, and Internal Audit." Adrian placed the phone back in his pocket. Grant was still watching from the host stand. Chloe was still smirking at the bar. The rich men beside him were still amused by a story they did not understand. Lily had no idea who sat in front of her. And that was why the soup meant everything. Adrian lifted the spoon. Then he looked at Lily and finally found his voice. "What is your name again?" "Lily Dawson." He nodded. "Lily Dawson." He said it like he was writing it somewhere permanent. She smiled politely. "Yes, sir." Adrian looked down at the bowl. "Thank you, Miss Dawson." Grant laughed from across the room. "Do not get too attached, Lily. He is leaving after that soup." Adrian tasted the soup. It was warm, simple, human. Then he looked toward the entrance, where the glass doors reflected the city lights outside.
8 minutes. That was all Grant had left before the room learned who owned it. 8 minutes. That was all Grant Miller had left before the room learned who owned it. But Adrian Cole did not move. He sat at the worst table in his own bar, wearing the faded gray coat, holding a spoon above a bowl of tomato basil soup, while the man he had trusted to manage the velvet room laughed at him from across the floor. The soup smelled like basil, cream, and roasted garlic. It should have been ordinary. It was not. The first spoonful carried Adrian back 34 years to a kitchen with cracked yellow tile, a leaking window, and a mother who knew how to make half a sandwich feel like a full meal. Rose Cole had been a waitress before Adrian understood what work was. She wore black shoes with rubber soles, kept a pencil behind one ear, and came home smelling like coffee, fryer oil, and soap. Some nights she brought leftover bread in a paper bag and said, "Look what I found for us." She never said scraps. She never said charity. She said found, as if dignity could be rescued from the bottom of a long shift if you wrapped it carefully enough. When Adrian was 10, he once asked why she always served him first. Rose smiled and said, "Because a child should eat before he worries." Years later, when he became rich, when magazines called him self-made, when investors asked about his discipline, he never told them the truth. He was not self-made. He was Rose-made. That was why Lily Dawson's sentence had struck him so hard. Eat first, worry later. It was not just kindness, it was an echo. Earlier that same morning, at 9:02, Adrian had been sitting in the 11th floor conference room of Cole Hospitality Group headquarters on North Wabash Avenue. The room looked nothing like his childhood kitchen. Glass walls, walnut table, coffee poured into white porcelain cups, a screen showing revenue charts in blue and gold. Marissa Blake, the Chief Operations Director, stood beside the screen with a file in her hand. "The downtown Velvet Room is still our strongest location," she said. "Gross revenue up 15% from last quarter. Private booking revenue up 27%. Bottle service retention is excellent." Adrian did not smile. He looked at the second page. Employee turnover. 9 resignations in 6 months. Customer complaints. 8 formal complaints. Anonymous staff reports. 3. Tip pool variance. Unexplained. He tapped the page. "Why is this under operational noise?" Marissa hesitated. "Grant Miller reports that the turnover is from performance standards. He says some staff cannot keep pace with a premium floor." Adrian looked up. "And the complaints? Mostly customers who did not understand the concept, according to Grant." Adrian stared at the words on the report. Did not understand the concept. He had heard versions of that sentence before, from bankers who did not understand his mother deposit, from restaurant managers who did not understand why a tired waitress wanted a job near the front room, from investors who did not understand why Adrian wanted luxury hospitality to include warmth instead of worship. He turned another page. One customer had written, "Beautiful bar, but I left feeling poorer than when I entered." Another wrote, "I asked for the least expensive wine, and the bartender smiled like I had confessed something shameful." Another wrote, "The waitress was kind, but the manager looked at my coat and asked if I was waiting for someone." Adrian read that line twice. My coat, not my behavior, not my words. My coat. That was the first alarm. Marissa said, "I can schedule a formal inspection." "No," Adrian closed the file. "If we inspect them formally, they will perform. Then what do you want to do?" Adrian looked toward the framed photograph on the wall behind him.
It showed the first Velvet Room in 1998, a narrow bar with 12 stools, 6 tables, and 1 red velvet booth rescued from a closing theater. Rose Cole had sat in that booth on opening night. She wore a navy dress Adrian bought with money he did not really have. She ordered tea because alcohol hurt her stomach by then. When the first customer complained that the room was too small, Rose leaned toward Adrian and whispered, "Small rooms are fine if nobody inside them makes you feel smaller." That became the first line of the company's service philosophy. A truly elegant room never makes a person feel small. Adrian looked back at Marissa. "Tonight, I go in as someone they do not think matters." Marissa shook her head. "Adrian, I need to know. We can send secret shoppers." "Secret shoppers still look like shoppers. Then what will you look like?" He folded the report and placed it in his briefcase. "Like someone with $3. Marissa did not like it, but she knew better than to stop him when his voice sounded like that. At 4:30 that afternoon, Adrian stood in his walk-in closet and ignored the suits. He passed the tailored navy coat, the cashmere sweaters, the polished shoes, the silver watch worth more than his mother had earned in a year. At the back of the closet, in a storage bag, was the gray coat. It had belonged to his uncle first, then to him during the years he cleaned restaurant floors after closing to save for his first liquor license. The sleeve lining was torn, the collar had a water stain. One pocket still held an old bus transfer from a winter he had tried to forget. He put it on. Then he took Rose's photograph from his desk. In the picture, she was standing behind a diner counter with one hand on a coffee pot, smiling at someone outside the frame. She looked tired. She looked kind. She looked like a woman who had learned how to survive without becoming hard. Adrian held the photograph for a long moment. "I need to see what we became, Mama." The apartment was silent. He placed the photograph in his pocket. Then he counted $3.40 into his palm. Small money. A large test. Across the city, at almost the same hour, Lily Dawson was tying her son's shoes in a one-bedroom apartment on South Ashland Avenue. Noah was 6 years old, with dark curls, serious eyes, and a fever that made his cheeks shine. "Do I have to go to Miss Carmen?" he asked. Lily knelt in front of him. "Only until I get home." "What if I feel worse?" "Then Miss Carmen calls me and I come. Even if your boss gets mad?" Lily smiled, but it hurt. Even then. On the kitchen table sat 3 bills: electric bill, daycare balance, rent reminder. Beside them was a small orange bottle of children medicine and a school paper Noah had drawn in blue crayon. The drawing showed Lily carrying a tray, smiling, with words written in uneven letters. "My mom helps people feel welcome."
Lily had taped it to the refrigerator, even though the refrigerator buzzed loudly and did not always stay cold. Noah looked at the paper. "Mom, yes. Do rich people get hungry too?" Lily laughed softly. "Everybody gets hungry." "Then why do some restaurants not let poor people sit down?" She stopped tying the shoe. The question had come from a memory. 2 weeks earlier, she and Noah had passed a restaurant where a man outside asked for water. The host had told him to move along. Noah had watched too carefully. Lily finished the knot. "Because some people forget that money is not what makes someone human." Noah frowned. If somebody comes to your work and has no money, what do you do? Lily looked at the bills, then at her son. She could have said policy. She could have said, ask a manager. She could have said, the world is complicated. Instead, she touched his cheek. We do not make them ashamed. No one nodded, as if she had given him a rule for the whole world. Lily wished she could live up to it every time. She was tired in the bones, tired in the way single parents learn not to say out loud because there is nobody to hand the tiredness to. Her husband had left 2 years earlier, taking his suitcase, his apologies, and half the rent. Lily had dropped out of her hospitality management program at Malcolm Community College with only 14 credits left. She told herself it was temporary. Temporary became months. Months became years. The Velvet Room job was supposed to be a bridge. Good tips, flexible shifts, a chance to return to school later. Then Grant became manager. Schedules became weapons. Preferred sections went to servers who laughed at his jokes and pushed expensive bottles. Staff meals became something he controlled, like a favor. Tip pools grew unclear. Complaints disappeared. Lily had questioned the math twice and lost 2 Saturday shifts. After that, she learned how expensive honesty could be. Still, she kept a small card inside her order book. It was from her first hospitality instructor, Professor Elena Morris. Service is not servitude. It is the art of making a person feel safe enough to be seen. Lily read that card before difficult shifts. That Friday, she read it twice. By 5:30, she had dropped Noah with Miss Carmen upstairs, kissed his warm forehead, and taken the bus downtown. Her uniform was pressed, but her shoes were worn at the inside heel. In her purse were $7, a bus card, Noah medicine receipt, and the folded rent reminder. At 6:15, she entered through the back door of the Velvet Room. Grant was already angry. Pre-shift meeting in 5 minutes, he called. The staff gathered near the service station. Chloe stood with her arms crossed. 2 bartenders leaned against the wall. Lily stood near the back. Grant held the reservation tablet. Tonight is a premium Friday, he said. We have Emerson Hotel executives at 8, the Harper Legal Group at 8:30, and a private tasting in room 2 at 9. I do not want low-value traffic sitting in the center. I do not want water-only guests taking real estate. If somebody looks like they wandered in from the street, you move them politely, or you call me. Lily raised her hand. Grant stared. Yes, Lily, what counts as low-value traffic? Chloe rolled her eyes. Grant smiled. People who are not here to participate in the experience. Lily said, or people who cannot spend much. The room went quiet. Grant stepped closer. You are not here to rewrite our business model. I am asking because last week we had a complaint from a guest who ordered house wine and felt ignored. Grant said, that complaint was handled. By closing it. By determining it had no merit. Lily looked down. She knew the guest, Helen Parker. Mrs. Parker never complained loudly. She only wrote one careful email. Lily had helped her find the receipt number. Grant lowered his voice. You want Saturday tables next week. Lily did not answer. Grant smiled. Then focus on guests who help you earn them. That was the rule under everything. Money first, people later. At 7:22, Adrian stepped out of the taxi. At 7:31, the designer couple got the booth. At 7:42, Helen Parker was kept waiting. At 7:50, Lily reached Adrian's table. Now, at 8:07, she stood in the kitchen corridor with the staff meal soup tray in her hands, and Grant blocking half the doorway. He held the manager tablet. I am documenting this, he said. Lily looked at the tablet. Documenting what? Unauthorized staff meal transfer to non-paying guest, failure to protect premium floor, service misjudgment. Lily felt the words land in her stomach. Those words could cost her shifts. Shifts were rent. Rent was no bed. She looked back toward the dining room. Adrian sat alone at the corner table, shoulders slightly folded, spoon still in his hand. The men at the next table laughed again, softer now, but still enough. He looked like someone trying not to take up space. Lily knew that look. Her mother had worn it in grocery lines when a card declined. Noah wore it when other children brought new backpacks. Lily had worn it the day she asked Grant about missing tip money, and he said maybe she was not math-oriented. She gripped the tray. Grant said, "You can still fix this. Take the soup back. Tell him the kitchen changed policy. I will forget the write-up." For 1 second, Lily wanted to do it. The desire was so strong it frightened her. She imagined Noah asleep upstairs with the fever patch. She imagined the rent reminder. She imagined losing Saturday night tips. She imagined telling herself the man at table 14 would be fine, that he probably had somewhere else to go, that she could not save everyone. Then she heard Noah's voice.
If somebody comes to your work and has no money, what do you do? She closed her eyes. We do not make them ashamed. When she opened them, Grant was still waiting. Lily said, I already gave him my word. Grant leaned closer. Your word does not pay payroll. No, Lily said, but it is the only thing here that still feels honest. She walked past him before fear could change her mind. That was the moment Adrian saw, not just the soup, the cost of the soup. And it was why, when she placed the bowl before him, he could barely speak. At 8:10, Adrian's phone buzzed again. Marissa was now 3 minutes away. Human Resources and Legal were with her. Internal Audit was joining by secure call. Adrian did not look at the door. He looked at Lily. Grant had written her up for kindness. Chloe had laughed. Customers had watched. Helen Parker had lowered her wine glass and now stared at Adrian with the slow recognition of someone putting an old face beside a newer one. She whispered to herself, Rose boy.
Adrian heard it. He turned slightly. Mrs. Parker's eyes widened. She knew. Not all of it, but enough. Adrian pressed one finger gently against his lips. Please. Helen looked at Lily, then at Grant, then back at Adrian. She understood. She stayed quiet. But she took out her phone and opened a blank note. Witness statement, 8:11 in the evening. The first words appeared under her trembling thumb. I saw a waitress choose dignity when her manager chose image. At the host stand, Grant tapped his tablet and saved Lily's disciplinary note. Case number, VR, Chicago, service misjudgment, 187. He should not have done that. A cruel thing spoken aloud can be denied. A cruel thing saved in writing waits for the right person to open it. At 8:12, the glass door at the entrance opened. Cold air moved across the floor. Marissa Blake walked in first, wearing a black coat and carrying a leather folder. Behind her came Elaine Porter from Human Resources, Daniel West from Legal, and Simon Greer from Internal Audit. Grant straightened immediately. Chloe stopped polishing. Lily froze with the empty tray in her hands. Adrian stayed seated. Grant moved quickly toward the entrance, smiling too widely. Miss Blake, he said, we were not expecting you tonight. Marissa looked past him. Her eyes found Adrian at table 14, the poor-looking man near the kitchen door, the man with $3.40 beside his soup bowl, the man Grant had just tried to remove. Marissa did not smile. She walked directly toward him. Grant's face changed with every step, because no executive walks past a manager for a nobody. Not unless the nobody is not a nobody. Adrian placed the spoon down. The metal touched the bowl with a small sound. Then Marissa stopped beside his table and said, "Mr. Cole, we are here as requested." The room went silent. "Mr. Cole, we are here as requested." Marissa Blake said it beside table 14. The room went silent so completely that the jazz piano near the back sounded suddenly too loud. Grant Miller froze near the host stand with the manager tablet still in his hand. Chloe Reed held a glass under the bar towel, but stopped wiping. The three men at the next table slowly lowered their drinks. Lily Dawson stood beside Adrian with an empty tray, her face pale, her eyes moving from Marissa to the man in the old gray coat. Mr. Cole. The name was familiar to every employee in the building. It was printed on payroll documents. It was on the company handbook. It was at the bottom of the service philosophy framed in the back hallway. Adrian Cole, founder and owner of the Velvet Room. But the man at table 14 did not look like the photograph from corporate training. He did not look like the man in the magazine article hanging near Grant's office. He looked like a tired stranger with scuffed shoes, $3.40, and a bowl of soup a waitress had risked her schedule to bring him. That was what made the silence painful. Everyone had seen him before they knew him. Now they had to live with what they had shown. Grant recovered first because men like him often mistake quick speech for control. "Miss Blake," he said, forcing a laugh, "I think there may be some confusion. This gentleman has been part of a small service issue. I was just handling it." Marissa did not look at Grant. She looked at Adrian. "Would you like us to proceed here, sir?" Adrian placed his spoon beside the bowl. "Yes." Grant's smile weakened. "Sir?" Adrian slowly reached into the inside pocket of the old coat and pulled out a leather card case. It was worn at the edges, not expensive looking, but clean. From it, he removed a black identification card with the Cole Hospitality Group seal. He placed it on the table next to the coins. Adrian Cole, founder, chief owner, board chair. Chloe made a small sound behind the bar. One of the real estate men whispered, "No way." Mrs. Helen Parker closed her eyes as if she had expected the truth and still felt the weight of it. Lily stared at the identification card, then at Adrian. "You are the owner." Adrian looked at her gently. "Yes." Lily's hand tightened around the tray. The first emotion on her face was not relief. It was fear. That told Adrian everything about the culture Grant had built. A kind employee had done the right thing, and even after discovering the person she helped was powerful, she still expected punishment. Adrian stood. He was taller than he had seemed while seated. The old coat did not hide the authority in his posture now. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. "Grant," he said. Grant swallowed. "Mr. Cole, I apologize. Had I known it was you, I would never have allowed any of this." Adrian looked at him for a long moment. "Had you known it was me?" Grant blinked. "Yes, sir." "Of course." Adrian nodded slowly. "That is the problem." The words were soft. They cut anyway. Lily lowered her eyes. Grant tried again. "What I mean is that we have protocols for executive visits. I would have arranged proper service." Adrian said, "I did not come to inspect your service for executives." He looked around the room. "I came to see what happens to someone with no name you respect and no money you want." No one answered. Adrian turned to Marissa. "Open incident file VR, Chicago Guest Dignity Review. Time of first observation, 7:22 in the evening. Location, the Velvet Room, downtown Chicago, Mercer Street entrance." Marissa opened her folder and nodded to Elaine Porter from Human Resources. Elaine started typing on a tablet. Adrian continued. Present are Marissa Blake, Chief Operations Director, Elaine Porter, Human Resources Director, Daniel West, Legal Counsel, Simon Greer, Internal Audit.
Witnesses include Lily Dawson, Chloe Reed, Grant Miller, Mrs. Helen Parker, and multiple floor guests. Grant's face tightened at the word witnesses. People like Grant loved audiences when they were applauding him. He hated them when they became records. Adrian looked at Lily. "Miss Dawson, you were not in trouble." Lily nodded, but still looked shaken. Grant said quickly, "She violated meal policy." Adrian turned to him. "Do not speak over me again." Grant closed his mouth. The bar stopped breathing. Adrian pointed at the bowl. She used her staff meal to serve a person she believed was hungry. "You wrote her up for that." Grant looked down at the tablet. "I documented a policy deviation." Adrian held out his hand. "Show me." Grant hesitated. "Now." Grant gave him the tablet. Adrian read the entry. Case number VR, Chicago. Service misjudgment 187. Employee Lily Dawson. Violation unauthorized staff meal transfer to low-value guest. Failure to protect premium floor atmosphere. Potential damage to private client experience. Recommended consequence section removal for next premium weekend. Adrian looked up. Low-value guest. Grant said, "That is internal shorthand." "For what?" Grant was silent. Adrian waited. The entire room waited with him. Grant finally said, "For guests who are unlikely to spend enough to justify extended service." Adrian looked toward Lily. And she was going to lose her weekend section? For giving soup to one? Grant said, "That is not the full context." "Then give me the full context." Grant straightened. "This is a high-end bar. We are located across from the Emerson Hotel. Our private clients expect a certain atmosphere. If someone enters looking unstable, homeless, or unable to pay, my responsibility is to protect guests and staff." Adrian let the words sit. Unstable, homeless, unable to pay, protect. Every cruel system has a clean word it hides behind. Grant had chosen protect. Adrian said, "Did I threaten anyone?" "No." "Did I refuse to pay for something after ordering it?" "No." "Did I ask for free alcohol?" "No." "Did I disturb a guest?" Grant glanced at the real estate table. They were laughing. Adrian said, "I did not ask whether they were amused. I asked whether I disturbed them." Grant had no answer. Adrian turned to the three men at the next table. "Gentlemen, did I speak to you before you laughed at me?" The man in the navy suit looked down. "No." "Did I interrupt your meal?" "No." "Did I ask you for money?" "No." Adrian nodded. "Thank you." He turned back to Grant. "The disturbance was not my presence. It was your permission for others to treat my presence as shameful." Grant's mouth opened, then closed. Chloe set the glass down too hard. It clicked against the marble bar. Adrian turned toward her. "Miss Reed." Chloe went still. "You told me there was a coffee shop around the corner." She swallowed. "I was trying to be helpful." Adrian looked at her. "Were you being helpful when you said water was free for now?" Chloe color changed. "I did not mean anything by that." Mrs. Helen Parker's voice came from near the stage. "Yes, you did." Everyone turned. Helen sat upright with her cream shawl around her shoulders, phone in her hand. "I heard her. I also heard the manager call him a problem before he had done anything but ask for a seat." Grant said, "Mrs. Parker, with respect." Helen cut him off. "Respect is exactly what has been missing in this room." The words landed with surprising strength from a woman who had spoken quietly all night. Adrian looked at her. "Mrs. Parker?" She met his eyes.
I knew your mother, Adrian. She would have been ashamed of this room tonight, but proud of that waitress. The room changed again. Rose Cole had entered it through memory. Grant did not know who Rose was, but Adrian did. Marissa did. Helen did. And Lily saw Adrian's face soften with something deeper than anger. Adrian said quietly, "Thank you." Helen lifted her phone. "I started a witness note at 8:11. I wrote what I saw before you revealed who you were." Daniel West, legal counsel, stepped forward. "Mrs. Parker, with your consent, we will preserve that as part of the incident file." "You have my consent." Grant looked trapped now. The issue was no longer one poor-looking man. It was procedure, witness, record, pattern. At 8:19, Simon Greer from Internal Audit connected his laptop to the small display at the host stand. Grant watched the screen like a man watching water approach a locked room. Adrian said, "Pull the tip pool variance for the last 90 days. Grant reacted too quickly. "That is not related to this incident." Adrian looked at him. "I decide scope tonight." Simon opened the payroll audit module. Tip pool variance, downtown Chicago location, 90-day review. Shared tip receipts, declared distribution, manager adjustments, manual overrides. The numbers loaded slowly. Lily stood very still. Chloe looked away. Two servers near the service station exchanged a nervous glance. Adrian saw that. Fear leaves fingerprints before records do. Simon frowned. "There are 12 manual tip adjustments in 90 days. Marissa asked, "Authorized by whom?" Simon clicked. "Grant Miller." Grant said, "Those are standard corrections." Simon continued. "Reason codes include breakage recovery, premium floor imbalance, service misjudgment, and manager discretion." Lily whispered, "Service misjudgment." Adrian turned to her. "You have seen that code before." She looked at Grant, then at Adrian. "Yes." "How many times?" "Twice for me, more for others." Grant snapped, "Lily, be careful." Adrian stepped between them. "No, you be careful." The room froze. Adrian's voice stayed low. "You will not warn an employee while Human Resources is documenting a conduct review." Elaine Porter looked at Grant. "Any retaliation, threat, schedule penalty, tip penalty, or intimidation after this point becomes a separate violation." Grant clenched his jaw. "Understood." Lily looked down at the tray in her hands. Adrian said, "Miss Dawson, did you ever raise concern about tip distribution?" She nodded, once in May, once in June. "To whom?" "Grant." "What happened after the first time?" "My Friday section changed for 2 weeks." "What happened after the second?" "I lost one private party shift." Grant said, "That is not true. Scheduling is based on performance." Adrian looked at Simon. "Pull Lily Dawson's schedule after May 12th and June 17th. Simon typed. The display changed. May 12th. Lily sent message to Grant asking about tip pool math. May 13th. Friday premium floor shift removed. June 17th. Lily asked whether manager discretion could reduce shared tips. June 18th. Private tasting room shift removed. A server near the wall whispered, "He did that to Marco, too." Elaine turned. "Your name?" The server swallowed. "Daniel Kim." Elaine said, "Mr. Kim, please remain available for statement." Daniel nodded. Grant glared at him. Daniel looked terrified. But he did not take the words back. That mattered. Adrian looked around. Who else had shifts changed after questioning tips or service policy? For a long second, no one moved. Then a busser raised his hand. Then one bartender. Then a hostess. Then another server. Chloe did not raise her hand, but she looked less certain now. Grant's voice sharpened. This is a coordinated attack. Marissa said, "No, Grant. This is what happens when people finally believe someone above you is listening." That sentence hit harder than she intended. Lily looked at Marissa with something close to disbelief. Listening had not been her experience. At 8:31, Adrian asked for the guest complaint archive. Grant said, "Those files contain private customer information." Daniel answered, "Legal is present, open redacted summaries." Simon pulled the records. 8 formal complaints in 6 months. Adrian read them aloud, one by one.
Guest stated bartender laughed when asked for least expensive wine. Guest stated manager said main seating was reserved after seeing guest clothing, though online booking showed open tables. Guest stated staff ignored request for water while serving nearby guests who arrived later. Guest stated delivery worker seeking kitchen entrance was told to use alley and not come through the front. Guest stated older woman waiting alone was treated as though she could not afford service. Helen Parker raised her hand slightly. "That one is me." Adrian looked at her. "I am sorry." Helen nodded. "Lily helped me that night too." Adrian turned the page. Guest stated they saw uneaten staff meal portions discarded after closing, despite request from employee to donate through approved food rescue partner. Lily closed her eyes. Adrian looked at her. "You filed that?" "Yes." "What happened?" Grant said the optics of donation bags at the back door would attract the wrong crowd. Adrian's face hardened. "The wrong crowd," Grant said. "Food donation creates liability." Marissa replied, "Cole Hospitality Group has a safe donation policy under Good Table Partnership. All locations are approved to donate eligible prepared food through sealed end-of-night pickup." Grant blinked. Adrian looked at him. "You knew that policy." Grant said, "It was not practical at this location." Adrian asked, "Did you document a safety exception?" "No." "Did you request review?" "No." "Did you simply order food thrown away to protect image?" Grant said nothing. Lily whispered, "We threw away trays of soup last month." Adrian looked at the bowl in front of him. Tomato basil soup. A poor-looking man had to be shamed before the owner discovered his bar had been throwing away food while punishing a waitress for feeding someone. That was the second wound. At 8:40, Grant tried a different path. "Mr. Cole, with respect, I have made this location extremely profitable. Whatever mistakes were made tonight, the financial performance speaks for itself." Adrian nodded. "Yes, it does." Grant seemed relieved. Adrian continued, "It says you learned how to extract money from wealthy guests while reducing humanity everywhere else." Grant's face tightened. "That is unfair." Adrian's voice did not change. "What is unfair is an employee losing shifts for asking where her tips went." He pointed toward Lily. "What is unfair is a hungry guest being called low value." He looked toward Helen. "What is unfair is a woman who knew my mother waiting 9 minutes for a glass of wine because she did not look expensive enough tonight." Helen's lips trembled. Adrian turned to the whole room. "And what is unfair is that every person here knew how Grant worked before I walked in. But most of you believed silence was safer than truth." No one moved. Even Chloe lowered her eyes. Lily looked at the floor too. Adrian noticed. "Miss Dawson." She looked up. "You were not silent tonight." "No," she said, "but I was silent before." Grant looked sharply at her. Lily continued, "I complained twice about tips. I complained once about food waste, but I stopped saying things after I lost shifts. I saw guests treated badly. Sometimes I helped after. Sometimes I did not do enough before." Her voice broke. "I was scared." Adrian listened. He did not rescue her from the truth.
A real leader does not turn honest guilt into easy comfort. After a moment, he said, "Fear explains silence. It does not make silence harmless." Lily nodded, tears in her eyes. "I know." Then he added, "But tonight, when fear had a price, you still chose the person in front of you. That matters." Lily covered her mouth. Chloe shifted behind the bar. Something in her face changed. Maybe shame. Maybe fear. Maybe the first crack in the story she had told herself, that kindness was weakness and Grant was just realistic. Adrian turned to Chloe. "Miss Reed, you are talented. I know your sales numbers." Chloe looked startled. He knew.
Of course he knew. He owned the room. He continued, "But talent without kindness becomes a weapon in hospitality. Did Grant instruct you to push away guests who did not look profitable?" Chloe looked at Grant. Grant whispered, "Do not." Elaine said, "Miss Reed, answer without direction from your manager." Chloe's hands trembled. "Yes," Grant said. "Chloe." She flinched, then kept going. "He said people like that bring down the mood. He said if they do not order within 3 minutes, make them uncomfortable enough to leave." Adrian closed his eyes briefly. Make them uncomfortable enough to leave. There it was. Not implied, spoken. Grant shouted, "That is not what I meant." Daniel West said, "Stop." The whole room went still. Daniel turned to Grant. "From this point forward, you are instructed not to interrupt witness statements. You may respond when asked by legal or human resources." Grant looked around for support. There was none. Not from Chloe, not from Lily, not from the servers. Not even from the wealthy table that had laughed at Adrian before knowing his name. The navy suit man stood slowly. Mr. Cole. Adrian looked at him. "My name is Preston Vale. I laughed earlier. I should not have. I thought it was harmless." Adrian waited. Preston swallowed. "It was not harmless. I made it easier for your manager to treat him, to treat you like you did not belong. I am sorry." Adrian said, "Do not apologize to the owner because you recognized power. Think about whether you would have apologized to the man in the coat." Preston's face reddened. He looked at the old coat. Then he said quietly, "I probably would not have." Adrian nodded. That is the honest answer. The room did not like honesty, but it needed it. At 8:52, Simon Greer found the file that changed the night. Grant had created a hidden service tag inside the reservation notes, not visible to guests, visible only to managers and lead bartenders. Code LR, loitering risk. Simon opened the tag history. 31 guests tagged in 4 months. Some had ordered only water. Some had ordered low-priced beer. Some had asked for house wine. Some had asked whether they could sit while waiting for a ride. Some had been delivery workers, musicians, older guests, or people dressed casually. Adrian read the list. Then he saw one name. Rose Parker. Helen Parker leaned forward. "That is me. My legal first name is Rose, but I go by Helen." Adrian looked at Grant. "You tagged Mrs. Parker as a loitering risk." Grant whispered, "I did not know who she was." Adrian's voice was colder than the marble bar. "You keep saying that like it helps you." Helen Parker stood slowly. Her hand shook around her cane. "I knew Adrian's mother when she worked nights at Bell Street Diner. Rose Cole used to give coffee to people who could not pay and never once made them feel like a burden. She would not recognize what you have done with her son, Barr." Grant could not look at her. Helen turned to Adrian. "Your mother used to say the poor do not need pity. They need to not be made smaller." Adrian looked down. The same words, the same root.
The whole night circled back to Rose. Adrian took the photograph from his pocket and placed it beside the coins in the soup bowl. For the first time, everyone saw it. Rose Cole in her diner uniform, a towel over her shoulder, a tired, kind smile. Adrian looked at Grant. "This is the woman I built the velvet room for." His voice lowered. "If she had walked in tonight wearing that uniform with $3 in her hand, what would you have done to her?" Grant did not answer. He did not have to. Everyone in the room already knew. Adrian turned to Marissa. "Suspend Grant Miller effective immediately. Remove his system access. Preserve his office computer, manager tablet, payroll notes, scheduling history, complaint closures, food waste logs, and all communication containing low value, loitering risk, premium floor, wrong crowd, and service misjudgment." Grant, face drained. "Mr. Cole, please." Adrian looked at him. "You called compassion a misjudgment," Grant whispered. "I was protecting the brand." "No," Adrian said. He lifted the photograph of Rose. "You were protecting a room where my mother would have been humiliated." Grant had no words left. Adrian looked at Lily, then at the bowl of soup. "And Miss Dawson was protecting the only part of it still worth saving." "And Miss Dawson was protecting the only part of it still worth saving." Adrian Cole said it with his mother photograph on the table, $3.40 beside it, and Lily Dawson standing a few feet away with tears in her eyes. The velvet room had never felt less like a bar. The jazz had stopped. The glasses behind the counter no longer looked glamorous. The amber lights still glowed over the black marble, but every polished surface now reflected something the room had spent months hiding: fear. Grant Miller stood near the host stand with his hands at his sides, as if his body had forgotten the shape of authority. Only 20 minutes earlier, he had controlled every section, every schedule, every smile, every warning whisper behind the bar. Now Marissa Blake held the manager tablet. Elaine Porter from Human Resources stood beside Lily. Daniel West from Legal opened a formal case file. Simon Greer from Internal Audit copied data from Grant Manager account. And Adrian, the man Grant had called low value, stood at table 14 like the floor had finally remembered who built it. Adrian turned to Marissa. "Read the suspension notice." Marissa nodded. "Grant Miller, effective immediately, you are suspended from management duties pending investigation into guest mistreatment, employee retaliation, tip pool irregularities, complaint suppression, food donation policy violations, and discriminatory service practices." Grant's face tightened at each phrase. Tip pool irregularities, complaint suppression, discriminatory service practices. Those were not insults. They were doors opening into consequences. Grant tried to keep his voice steady. "Mr. Cole, I have a right to respond." "You will respond," Adrian said. "On the record, with legal present, not while standing over employees you have threatened with schedules." Grant looked toward Chloe. She looked away. That was the second betrayal. But this one was not really betrayal. It was survival, changing sides. Daniel West stepped closer. "Mr. Miller, please surrender your manager keycard, office key, and tablet access token." Grant stared at him. "Now," Daniel said. Grant removed the keycard from his belt clip. The plastic made a small sound when it touched the host stand. It was nothing, and it was everything. A few employees looked at it like they were seeing a crown fall. Adrian looked toward Lily. "Miss Dawson, please sit down." Lily shook her head quickly. "I am all right." "No," Adrian said gently. "You have been standing in fear long enough." The sentence made her lips tremble. Elaine pulled a chair from table 9. Lily sat, hands folded tightly in her lap, the order pad still in her apron pocket. Adrian noticed it. The same small black order pad she had used to take his imaginary poor man order. He nodded toward it. Do you keep notes in there? Lily looked down. Sometimes. May I ask what kind? Things guests mention. Allergy notes, names, if someone likes extra lemon, if a child needs a lid on water. Things I do not want to forget. Grant gave a bitter laugh. That is not evidence. Adrian looked at him. Everything that proves someone cared is evidence tonight. Lily slowly opened the order pad. Inside, between pages of table numbers and drink orders, were small notes written in neat handwriting. Mrs. Parker prefers the backstage table because loud crowds make her anxious. Marco asked about missing tips after March 14th. Guest in green coat left after Chloe laughed at house wine question. Kitchen discarded 12 soup portions after Grant refused donation pickup. Noah fever. Buy medicine after shift. The last line made Lily blush with shame. Adrian looked away to give her privacy. Elaine did not. Not because she was cruel, because she understood what the line meant. A mother had been choosing honesty inside a room where every choice cost her something. Adrian said, "Miss Dawson, did you ever report the food donation issue in writing?" Lily nodded. "I sent an email on June 3rd. To whom? Grant? And the shared operations inbox." Marissa looked up sharply. "Operations inbox?" Lily nodded. Subject, food donation pickup denied at downtown location. Marissa opened her laptop. "I never saw that." Grant shifted. Marissa searched the archive. Nothing. Simon Greer typed quickly from his audit station. "It may have been redirected by location filter." Adrian turned to Grant. "What does that mean?"
Simon answered before Grant could. Managers can mark some incoming location emails as resolved at store level if they believe no escalation is needed. It prevents corporate operations from seeing duplicate service tickets. Adrian looked at Marissa, who approved that control. Marissa looked pained. "Operations did, for routine matters." Adrian said, "Throwing away eligible food while denying approved donation pickup is not routine. No." Simon found the file. Email subject, food donation pickup denied at downtown location. Submitted by Lily Dawson. Closed by Grant Miller. Resolution note. Employee misunderstood brand risk and food safety concerns. Coaching completed. Lily whispered, "There was no coaching." Grant said, "We discussed it." Lily looked at him. "You told me if I cared so much about feeding strangers, I should work at a shelter." The room went silent. Helen Parker placed one hand over her mouth. Adrian slowly turned toward Grant. "Did you say that?" Grant's jaw worked. "I may have used words to emphasize role clarity." Adrian nodded once. Role clarity. He looked toward the soup bowl. "Her role was clearer than yours." That was when Chloe Reed stepped away from the bar. Her face had lost all of its shine. "Mr. Cole," she said. Adrian looked at her. "Yes?" "I need to say something." Grant snapped. "Chloe, think carefully." Daniel raised one hand. "Mr. Miller, final warning." Chloe swallowed. "Grant told us to use pressure language. He said not everyone had to be asked to leave directly. He said sometimes you just make the room feel unavailable to them." Adrian asked, "What did pressure language mean?" Chloe closed her eyes. "Saying the cheapest items out loud so other guests could hear. Mentioning the dress code even when there was not one. Asking if they were waiting for someone. Telling them tables were reserved. Slowing service until they left. The employees along the wall looked at the floor. They knew every technique. Some had used them. Some had hated them. Most had obeyed them." Chloe's voice broke. "I did it too. I am not pretending I did not. I laughed tonight. I said cruel things. I thought Grant was right, that kindness made us look cheap." She looked at Lily.
But Lily kept doing the thing the handbook said we were supposed to do. Grant muttered, "The handbook does not run Friday revenue." Adrian heard him. He walked to the back hallway without speaking. Everyone watched him go. On the wall near the staff entrance, under the emergency exit map and beside the schedule board, hung a framed page from the original service philosophy. A truly elegant room never makes a person feel small. Rose Cole. Adrian removed the frame from the wall. His hands were steady, but his face had changed. He carried it back to the floor and placed it beside his mother photograph. Then he looked at Grant. "My mother said this in a bar, with 12 stools and a leaking ceiling.
I put it in every location because I never wanted us to forget that elegance without mercy is costume." Grant said nothing. Adrian continued, "You did not forget it. You replaced it." At 8:59, Marissa received confirmation from digital security. Grant manager files were locked. Security camera footage from 7:15 onward had been copied. Camera 1 showed the entrance. Camera 3 showed the bar. Camera 6 showed table 14. Camera 9 showed the host stand and Grant interactions. The audio was limited, but staff devices and the manager tablet recorded several notes with timestamps. Daniel West began reading the timeline aloud. 7:22. Unscheduled guest enters. Host marks watch in door log. 7:24. Chloe Reed tells guest no free samples. 7:27. Grant Miller directs staff to seat guest away from center. 7:50. Lily Dawson begins service at table 14. 7:53. Grant Miller approaches table after guest discloses limited funds. 7:56. Grant Miller warns Lily Dawson about premium floor standards. 8:03. Grant Miller creates disciplinary note case number VR Chicago Service Misjudgment 187. 8:06. Lily Dawson serves staff meal, soup and bread. 8:12. Corporate team enters. Daniel paused, then he added, 8:13. Grant Miller tells Marissa Blake he is handling an unsuitable guest. Grant flinched. Unsuitable. Another clean word that had become dirty once placed beside evidence. Adrian looked to Helen Parker. "Mrs. Parker, would you be willing to read your witness note?" Helen stood slowly. Her cane tapped once against the floor. "I will." She held her phone close, but her voice did not shake as much now. "At 8:11 in the evening, I saw waitress Lily Dawson bring soup to a man who appeared to have little money. Before that, I heard the manager describe him as a problem and say this was not a soup kitchen. I saw other guests laugh. I saw the bartender smirk. I saw Miss Dawson remain respectful while everyone else treated kindness like embarrassment." She looked at Adrian. "I also saw that the man did nothing to deserve removal. He was quiet, polite, hungry, or pretending to be hungry. Either way, Lily was the only person who treated him as fully human before she knew his name." No one spoke after that, because Helen had named the real test, before she knew his name. Adrian turned to the 3 men at the next table. "Mr. Vale, you said earlier you probably would not have apologized to the man in the coat." Preston Vale lowered his head. "Yes." "Would you give that statement in writing?" Preston nodded. "I will." Adrian looked at him. "Include your laughter." Preston swallowed. "I will." That mattered too. Not because Preston was the villain, because rooms like this do not become cruel through one manager alone. They become cruel when wealthy people enjoy the distance cruelty creates. At 9:10, Grant was escorted into the private tasting room for a recorded interview. The glass door remained visible from the floor, but the sound stayed inside. He sat at the long walnut table where private clients usually sampled rare whiskey. Daniel West sat across from him.
Elaine Porter sat to the side. Marissa stood near the wall. Simon Greer projected documents onto the room monitor. Adrian did not enter immediately. He walked instead to the service corridor near the kitchen. The corridor was narrow, hot, and smelled of bread, dish soap, and metal shelves. It was the part of the bar customers never saw. The floor was marked where carts had scraped it. A clipboard hung beside the pantry door. Under it was a food waste log. Adrian stood alone. For the first time since the reveal, anger loosened enough for grief to come through. He pressed one hand against the wall. "Mama," he whispered, "I missed it." He had built the chain for Rose. Then he had trusted reports. He had trusted sales. He had trusted men like Grant because they delivered numbers wrapped in polish. And while the charts went up, people had been walking out smaller. Lily had fought with soup. Helen had written notes. Employees had whispered. Customers had complained. And Adrian had almost arrived too late. For one moment, he wanted to walk out the back door. Not from weakness, from shame. Then the kitchen door opened. Lily stood there. She stopped when she saw him. "I am sorry," she said quickly. "I did not mean to interrupt." Adrian wiped his face with one hand. "You did not." She looked at him carefully. "Are you all right?" The question nearly undid him. She had just learned she might be in the center of a company investigation, and still she was asking whether he was all right. He gave a small, sad laugh. "You really do not know how to stop serving people." Lily looked down. "Sometimes I think it is the only thing I know how to do." Adrian shook his head. "No, it is the thing Grant tried to make you ashamed of. There is a difference." Lily held the edge of the kitchen door. "I should have reported more." "Yes," Adrian said. The honesty hurt her, but he did not soften it with a lie. Then he added, "And I should have built a company where reporting did not cost you rent." Lily looked up. That was the first time someone above Grant had placed responsibility above her fear. Adrian took the photograph of Rose from his pocket and showed it to her. "This was my mother." Lily looked at the photograph. She was beautiful. "She was tired," Adrian said. Lily smiled sadly. "Those can be the same thing." Adrian nodded, because that was exactly true. "My mother worked in restaurants most of her life. She used to say poor people do not need pity. They just need not to be humiliated." Lily's eyes filled. "My son asked me this morning what I would do if someone came in hungry and could not pay. Adrian already knew the answer, but he asked anyway. What did you tell him?" "That we do not make them ashamed." Adrian closed his eyes. For a moment, the corridor held Rose Cole and Noah Dawson in the same breath. A mother who had taught dignity from poverty. A child who still believed adults could choose it. Adrian stood straighter. Then that is what this company will become again. He walked back toward the floor, this time not as the poor man, not as the wounded son, as the owner who finally understood that kindness without power can be punished. So power must learn to protect kindness. At 9:26, Adrian entered the private tasting room. Grant was mid-sentence. "I am being judged for maintaining brand quality in a difficult urban environment." Adrian closed the door behind him. Grant stopped. Adrian sat at the head of the table. "No, you are being investigated for confusing cruelty with quality." Daniel West turned to the screen. "We have preliminary findings." Simon displayed the first document. Tip Pool Variance Report. For 90 days, manual manager adjustments totaled $4,860. Employees with documented questions about tip distribution lost premium shifts within 7 days of their inquiries in 5 of 6 reviewed cases. Lily name appeared twice: Marco Santos, Daniel Kim, Renee Wallace. Grant said, "Scheduling is subjective." Simon opened another sheet. "The pattern is not." Second document: Guest Complaint Closure Review. 16 complaints in 12 months closed by Grant without video review or corporate escalation. 11 mentioned appearance, clothing, low-priced orders, or feeling unwelcome. 4 were connected to guests later tagged as loitering risk. Third document: Food Donation Deviation.
Approved food rescue partner, Good Table Partnership, missed 11 scheduled pickups from the downtown location. Manager notes listed brand image concerns despite no approved exemption from corporate policy. Marissa's voice was cold. "We called Good Table. They said your location repeatedly told drivers there was nothing available, while waste logs show prepared food discarded those same nights." Grant looked cornered now. His excuses had fewer places to stand. Adrian leaned forward. "Why?" Grant looked at him. "Why what? Why throw away food instead of donating it?" Grant rubbed his forehead. "Because donors at this level do not want to see donation bins at the back door. Because private clients do not want to step over people waiting for leftovers. Because if word spreads that we feed people, people come, and then the wrong image follows." Adrian let the words sit. Then he said, "Thank you for finally telling the truth." Grant realized what he had done. The wrong image. Not a safety issue, not a logistics issue, an image issue. Daniel wrote it down. At 9:40, Adrian made the first decisions. Grant Miller remained suspended pending termination and legal review. His access to scheduling, payroll, complaint records, and guest tagging systems was revoked. The hidden loitering risk tag was disabled across the company pending audit. All tip adjustments from the downtown branch for the last 12 months would be reviewed by internal audit and outside payroll counsel. Every affected employee would receive back pay if improper withholding was confirmed. All food donation records would be reviewed. Good Table Partnership pickups would resume within 48 hours. Every closed guest complaint under Grant would be reopened. Chloe Reed and other employees who participated in pressure language would be suspended pending individual review. Employees who cooperated honestly would receive protection from retaliation, but not immunity from accountability. Lily Dawson would not receive any disciplinary action for serving the soup. Grant stared at Adrian. "You are letting her walk away clean because she made you emotional." Adrian's voice sharpened. "No." He pointed toward the folder. "She walks away from discipline because she followed the service philosophy better than her manager did." Grant leaned back, defeated but still bitter. "You think kindness pays rent on this place?" Adrian looked at him. Tonight, kindness saved it. At 9:55, Adrian returned to the sales floor. Everyone looked up. The room had changed in small ways. The rich guests were quieter. The staff stood farther apart, no longer protected by group laughter. Helen Parker sat with Lily at table 14. The soup bowl was still there, half full and cooling. Adrian stood at the center of the room. He did not hide the old coat. He did not remove the cap. He wanted everyone to remember who they thought he was. Then he spoke. "The Velvet Room was built because my mother, Rose Cole, spent her life serving people who often failed to see her. I promised myself that if I ever owned a room like this, a person could enter with old shoes and still be treated with care." He paused. "Tonight, I entered with old shoes. No one moved. Most of you saw the shoes before you saw the person." Chloe began to cry silently. Adrian continued. "Miss Dawson saw the person first. Mrs. Parker witnessed it. Some of you laughed.
Some of you stayed silent. Some of you were afraid. Every one of those choices mattered. His eyes moved across the room. We will not fix this by firing one man and pretending the company is clean. We will fix it by opening every record that allowed one man to make cruelty profitable. Lily looked at him. He looked back. And by protecting the people who still know how to be kind when kindness cost them something. That was when Chloe stepped forward from the bar. "Mr. Cole?" Adrian turned. Chloe wiped her cheeks.
I want to give a statement, not to save myself. I just do not want to lie anymore. Adrian nodded. Elaine will take it. Chloe looked at Lily. I am sorry I laughed. Lily did not rush to forgive her. She only said, "Tell the truth first." Chloe nodded. "I will." Helen Parker smiled faintly. "That is a beginning." Outside, Chicago traffic moved past the windows. Inside, the gold sign above the bar still read, "The Velvet Room." But now the name felt like a question. Would the room be soft only for the wealthy? Or would it finally become soft for the people who needed mercy most? Adrian looked at the soup bowl one last time, then at the coins, then at his mother photograph. The reveal was over. The reckoning had begun. The reveal was over. The reckoning had begun. At 10:12 that Friday night, the Velvet Room on Mercer Street stopped taking new guests. The gold sign outside still glowed, the amber lights still shone over the black marble bar, the bottles still stood in perfect rows behind Chloe Reed, who no longer looked proud of how beautifully she could pour drinks for people who looked expensive. But the room had changed. A bar can remain open and still be closed in spirit. That night, Adrian Cole closed the spirit first. Marissa Blake placed a notice on the host stand. Temporary service pause. Internal review in progress. Guests already inside were not rushed out. Adrian refused to repeat Grant Miller cruelty in reverse. Those who wanted to leave could leave. Those who wanted to give statements could stay. Those who wanted refunds received them without argument. Those who had laughed were not publicly shamed for entertainment, but they were asked to face what they had helped create. That was the difference between justice and revenge. Justice asks for truth. Revenge asks for a show. Adrian had no interest in a show. He stood near table 14 where the soup bowl had gone cold and looked at the $3.40 beside his mother photograph. Small money, large proof. Lily Dawson sat at the table with Elaine Porter from Human Resources. Her apron was folded on her lap. Her hands were still trembling, but her voice had become steadier with every answer. "Yes," she said, "I raised the tip issue twice. Yes, Grant reduced my preferred shifts afterward. Yes, staff were told to move people who did not look like premium guests. Yes, food was thrown away on nights when Good Table Partnership was scheduled to collect donations. Yes, I was afraid." Elaine looked up. Afraid of what? Lily took a slow breath. Afraid of losing rent. Afraid of losing Noah medicine. Afraid of being called difficult. Afraid that if I told the truth and nobody believed me, Grant would know I had tried. Her voice cracked on that last line. Adrian heard it from across the room. If I told the truth and nobody believed me. That sentence explained more than any audit could. Bad managers do not only silence people by shouting, they silence people by teaching them the truth has nowhere safe to land. Adrian turned to Marissa. "The reporting system changes tonight." Marissa nodded. "Already drafting it." "No." Adrian's voice was quiet but firm. "Not drafting. Effective tonight. No employee complaint involving a manager can be routed only to that manager. Every complaint about wages, tips, retaliation, discrimination, food safety, or guest mistreatment
goes to corporate human resources and legal review at the same time. Marissa typed, effective tonight. Daniel West added, we will issue an emergency policy memorandum. Adrian looked at the cold soup. Name it after table 14. Daniel paused. Adrian continued, table 14 reporting rule. If kindness had not sat at this table tonight, we would have missed everything. Lily looked down and began to cry silently. Not loudly, not for attention, for release. At 10:40, internal audit printed the first preliminary findings from grant files. The numbers were worse than anyone expected. $4,860 in manual tip adjustments over 90 days. 12 employees affected. 5 employees lost premium shifts within 1 week of questioning tip distribution. 11 missed food donation pickups. 16 complaints closed without complete review. 31 guests tagged as loitering risk. 7 guests tagged after ordering only water, house wine, beer, soda, or a small plate. 4 complaints used the phrase, made me feel poor. Adrian read that phrase out loud. Made me feel poor. The room did not move. He looked around at the crystal glasses, the velvet booths, the brass lamps, the polished bar. This was supposed to be a place where people paid to feel seen. Instead, some people paid and still left feeling smaller. Some did not even get the chance to pay before the room taught them to leave. Helen Parker sat near the stage, one hand around her cane. She said softly, your mother would have known what to do next. Adrian turned. Would she? Helen nodded. She would feed the people first. Then she would make the people who wasted food wash the bowls. A small, sad laugh moved through the room. Even Adrian smiled. Rose would have said that. Then he looked at Marissa. Start with the employees. Before anyone goes home tonight, every staff member receives a written statement explaining that tips are under audit, retaliation is prohibited, schedules are frozen pending review, and anyone who lost income due to improper retaliation will be compensated. Marissa nodded. Adrian continued. Then contact Good Table Partnership. Tell them downtown Chicago resumes pickup tomorrow night. I want the kitchen to document safe food handling, sealing, labeling, and pickup time. No more image excuses. Simon Greer said, we can set a 48-hour compliance check. 24, Adrian said. Simon nodded. 24. At 11:05, Grant Miller was escorted from the private tasting room. He no longer had his manager tablet, his key card was gone. His blazer was still neat, but the man inside it seemed reduced by the absence of power. He paused near the bar and looked at Adrian. Mr. Cole, he said, I gave this location everything. Adrian looked at him. No, you took from it. Grant's eyes hardened. You are making me the villain because of one emotional night. Adrian stepped closer. You were not removed because I felt emotional. You were removed because the records show retaliation, tip irregularities, suppressed complaints, hidden guest tags, and policy violations. My emotions only brought me here. Your evidence kept me here. Grant looked toward Lily. She is not as innocent as you think. She knew things and stayed. Lily flinched. Adrian did not. Yes, he said. She stayed silent too long. Grant seemed pleased for 1 second. Then Adrian continued. But tonight she told the truth, while you kept trying to rename cruelty as standards. Grant said nothing. Adrian's voice stayed calm. Do not mistake imperfect courage for your innocence. That sentence ended the conversation. Grant was escorted out through the front door, not the back. Not to humiliate him. To make sure the employees saw that power had actually changed hands. The glass door closed behind him at 11:11. No applause followed, only quiet. Lily stared at the door. Adrian noticed. He walked to her table. "Miss Dawson." She looked up quickly. "Yes, sir?" "You do not need to call me sir tonight." She shook her head. "I think I do." He smiled faintly. "Fair enough." Then his face grew serious. Grant was right about one thing. Silence helped him last longer. Lily's eyes filled again. "I know." Adrian sat across from her at table 14. "You were afraid because he made fear part of the job. That is on him. And on me. But from now on, fear cannot be the system." Lily wiped her cheeks. "What happens to me?" Adrian answered honestly. "You will give a full statement. Human Resources will review everything. You will not be punished for feeding me. You will not be punished for telling the truth tonight. But we are going to talk about the moments you wanted to report and did not." She nodded. "I want that." He looked surprised. She continued. "I do not want to be turned into some hero who never failed. I failed before tonight. I just do not want to keep failing." Adrian sat back. That was the second time she left him speechless. Not because she was perfect, because she refused to hide behind the good things she had done. At midnight, the last guests left. Helen Parker stayed until the end. Adrian walked her to the door himself. She paused beneath the gold sign. "Rose used to talk about you," she said. Adrian smiled sadly. "What did she say?" "That you watched everything, even when you were little. She said you had the eyes of a child who was already keeping receipts from the world." Adrian looked away. Helen touched his arm. "Tonight you finally opened one." He nodded. "I wish I had opened it sooner." She said, "Then make the next one easier for someone else to open." That became the work. By Monday morning, Cole Hospitality Group issued a company-wide statement. Not a polished apology written to protect the brand, a clear one. At our downtown Chicago Velvet Room location, our founder entered without revealing his identity and was treated as though limited money meant limited dignity. A waitress, Lily Dawson, served him with kindness before knowing who he was. Her actions exposed a culture in that location that contradicted our founding values. We have suspended the manager involved, opened audits into tip handling, complaint suppression, food donation failures, and guest profiling, and implemented emergency reporting protections across all locations. No guest should need wealth to be welcomed. No employee should risk rent to do the right thing. The statement spread quickly. Some people called it inspiring. Some called it public relations. Adrian accepted both reactions. A company that fails publicly does not get to control how the public feels about its apology. It only gets to decide whether the apology becomes work. So he made it work. Grant Miller was terminated after the investigation confirmed improper tip adjustments, retaliation through scheduling, suppression of complaints, violation of food donation policy, and discriminatory guest tagging. Chloe Reed was suspended for 30 days and required to complete service ethics retraining before returning under probation. She also gave statements that helped confirm Grant pressure language. Her talent saved nothing by itself. Her truth helped only because it arrived before the review closed. 3 employees received back pay for improper tip reductions. 9 employees received schedule restoration.
Good Table Partnership resumed nightly pickup from the downtown location, then expanded to all 16 Velvet Room locations. The hidden loitering risk tag was removed permanently. The company guest system was changed so no guest could be labeled based on appearance, perceived spending power, housing status, clothing, accent, age, or occupation. The Table 14 reporting rule became official policy. Every service complaint involving dignity, discrimination, wage concerns, retaliation, or food waste bypassed location management and went directly to corporate human resources, legal, and operations review. And every manager was required to attend a new training led not by an outside consultant, but by the people who had paid the price of the old culture. Lily was one of them. At first, she refused. "I am not qualified," she told Adrian in the quiet office above the bar 2 weeks later. The office still smelled faintly of whiskey barrels and old paper. Grant's name had been removed from the door. The room was waiting for a new purpose. Adrian sat across from Lily with a folder between them. "You are qualified because you understand what the job feels like when power is unsafe." Lily shook her head. "I have not even finished my hospitality program." "Then finish it." She looked up. He pushed the folder gently toward her. "Cole Hospitality Group will pay the remaining cost if you choose to return. No contract trap, no loyalty clause, no debt disguised as generosity. You can accept or refuse." Lily opened the folder slowly. Inside was a tuition support agreement for Malcolm Community College and a promotion offer. Guest care lead, downtown Chicago, training and dignity compliance, salary increase, child care stipend for evening training weeks. Lily stared at the words. "This feels like too much." Adrian shook his head. "No, too much was making you choose between rent and conscience." She covered her mouth. He continued, "This is not charity. This is correction." Lily read the title again. Guest Care Lead. What would I do? Train staff on service dignity, help review guest complaints, join the employee council, work with Marissa on food donation compliance. Teach managers what Grant taught them to forget. Lily looked at him. "And if I disagree with a manager?" "You report it. And if they are above me, you report it higher. And if nobody listens?" Adrian leaned forward. "Then you call me." Lily almost laughed through her tears. "That sounds dangerous for them." "Good," Adrian said. Then she looked down at the folder. "I will accept under one condition." Adrian smiled. "I had a feeling." Lily sat straighter. "Do not use me as a poster. I do not want my face on some campaign that says the company is kind now. I want the system to protect the next server, even if she is not kind enough to impress the owner." Adrian nodded slowly. "Agreed." She added, "And I want Noah to know I earned this, not that someone saved me." Adrian's voice softened. "Then we will make sure he knows the truth. You protected someone when it cost you something. That is not being saved. That is being seen." Lily signed. Her hand shook, but she signed. 3 months later, the Velvet Room reopened after a full operating reset. There was no celebrity party, no champagne wall, no velvet rope outside. Adrian refused every idea that made the reopening look like victory before the work had become habit. Instead, the first event was a staff meal, not for investors, not for private clients, for employees. Servers, bartenders, dishwashers, hosts, cooks, bussers, cleaners, security staff, payroll support, and food donation drivers from Good Table Partnership sat together in the main room. No one was assigned the worst table. No one ate standing in a corner. No manager held a tablet like a weapon. Lily stood near the bar in a simple black blazer. Noah sat at a side table with Miss Carmen, drawing with crayons on a napkin. He looked around the room with wide eyes. "This is where you work," he whispered when Lily came to check on him. "Yes, it looks fancy." "It is. Do fancy places let kids eat soup?" Lily smiled. "This one does." He looked at Adrian across the room. "Is that the man you gave soup to?" Lily nodded. Noah thought about that. Did he have money? Lily knelt beside him. "More than we knew." Noah frowned. "Then why did you buy him soup?" Lily touched his cheek. "Because people should not have to show everything they have before we decide they deserve kindness." Noah accepted this as if it were simple. Children often understand what adults make profitable to forget. At the front of the bar, Adrian stood beside a framed photograph of Rose Cole. It hung near the original service philosophy. A truly elegant room never makes a person feel small. Below it, a new brass plaque had been added. "No one should have to afford kindness. Rose Cole." Helen Parker had helped choose the wording. When Adrian saw it installed, he had stepped into the back hallway and cried alone for 3 minutes. Not because the plaque fixed anything, because his mother name was now attached to a standard that would outlive one speech. During the reopening training, Adrian spoke to every employee. "I used to think losing the soul of a company would feel dramatic," he said. "Like a scandal, a fight, a collapse. But now I know it can happen quietly. A guest ignored here. A worker punished there. A complaint closed too quickly. A meal thrown away. A joke made at someone who cannot afford to answer. Little by little, a room can become expensive and cheap at the same time." No one moved. He continued. "Lily Dawson did not save this company by knowing who I was. She saved the part of it that still mattered because she did not know who I was." Lily lowered her eyes. Adrian looked toward the staff. "If you only show respect when you recognize power, then you are not respectful. You are careful. There is a difference." That line became part of training, not as a slogan, as a warning. The first real test came 2 weeks after reopening. It was raining hard in Chicago. Wind pushed water sideways against the windows. At 7:45, when the bar was half full, an older man stepped inside wearing a soaked work jacket and carrying a plastic grocery bag. His shoes squeaked against the floor. He stood near the host stand like he was ready to apologize for existing. The new host, Daniel Kim, looked at him. "Good evening. Welcome to the Velvet Room." The man hesitated. "I just need to get out of the rain for a minute. I can buy water, maybe. I do not have much." Across the room, Lily looked up. Adrian was seated at table 14 that night. No disguise, no old coat, reviewing notes with Marissa. He saw the moment unfold. So did Chloe, back from suspension, quieter now, watched closely by a new manager. The host did not look toward Lily for permission. He did not look toward Adrian. He looked at the man. "You can sit here," he said. "Water is free. If you are hungry, the kitchen has soup tonight. We can bring a bowl." The man blinked. "I do not want trouble." Daniel smiled gently. "You are not trouble." Lily closed her eyes. Adrian looked down at the table. There it was. Not the public apology. Not the investigation. Not grant removal. Not the plaque. The test. An ordinary person on an ordinary night with nothing to offer the room except mead. And the room did not make him smaller. Chloe poured the water herself. Her hand shook slightly when she placed it on the tray. She carried it to the man with a clean napkin and a bowl of soup. "Sir," she said, "please warm up first." The man nodded, still confused by kindness. Adrian watched Chloe return to the bar. She did not look proud. She looked humbled. That was better. Lily walked to table 14 and set a bowl of tomato basil soup in front of Adrian. He looked up. "I did not order this." She smiled. "I know." He looked at the soup, then at her. "How much do I owe you?" Lily folded her hands behind her back. "For this one, nothing." He laughed softly. "I can afford it this time." "I know," she said, "but the first bowl still belongs to me." Adrian smiled. Then he looked toward the man warming his hands around a water glass near the entrance. "And that one?" "That one belongs to the company," Lily said. "Good." For a moment, neither spoke. Then Adrian said, "What did Noah think of the plaque?" Lily smiled. "He asked if kindness is expensive." "What did you say?" "I told him it only gets expensive when people forget to give it freely." Adrian looked at Rose's photograph. "Your son is going to understand this better than most adults." "I hope so." "He already does." Later that night, after closing, Adrian sat alone at table 14. The bar was quiet. Chairs were stacked in sections. The jazz stage was dark. In the kitchen, sealed containers waited for good table partnership pickup. On the table in front of him were the same $3.40, now kept in a small glass case, not as decoration, but as a reminder for management training. Beside it sat the photograph of Rose. Adrian touched the edge of the frame. "We are trying, Mama." The room did not answer, but memory did. Rose placing bread before him, Rose saying, "Eat first, worry later." Rose crying behind the kitchen door after a manager told her she did not fit the image. Rose still showing up the next morning with kindness intact. Adrian had spent his life building rooms she would be allowed to enter. He had learned that building them once was not enough. You have to guard the door every day. Not from poor people, from pride, from greed, from managers who call cruelty standards, from customers who laugh because the joke does not cost them, from leaders who worship revenue until complaints sound like noise, from silence, especially silence. He placed the coins back into the glass case. Then he wrote one more sentence on the training card for table 14. A guest is not low value because they spend little. A room becomes low value when it spends its humanity. The next morning, the sentence was printed and placed in every staff room across all 16 Velvet Room locations. And under it was one more line. If you see the room making someone smaller, speak. That was the legacy Lily helped restore. Not a free bowl of soup, not a surprise reveal, not a millionaire disguise. A system where kindness no longer had to sneak past management to survive. So if this story reminded you of someone who was judged by their clothes, their wallet, their job, or the amount they could spend, write their name in the comments. If you have ever seen a person mocked for needing help instead of being offered dignity, share this story. And if you believe no one should have to prove they are important before they are treated like a human being, subscribe for more stories where quiet kindness exposes loud cruelty, the powerful are held accountable, and justice begins when one person refuses to look away. Because Adrian Cole walked into his own bar pretending to have only $3.40. Grant Miller saw a problem. Chloe Reed saw a joke. The wealthy table saw entertainment. But Lily Dawson saw a person. That was why Adrian could not speak. Not because she served soup to a millionaire, because she served dignity to a stranger. And in the end, the Velvet Room did not change because the owner was powerful. It changed because one waitress with rent due, a sick child at home, and every reason to be afraid, still chose to say the sentence the whole company had forgotten. You do not have to be rich to be treated like a person here.